Good afternoon, and thank you for spending time with us today to talk about the state of the region. My name is Bobby Regan, City Club Board Member and Chair of the State of 2022 Program Series. Today, our guest is Metro Council President Lynn Peterson. Metro is currently the region's only elected regional government, which might be why so many people don't quite understand what it does. Metro serves more than 1.7 million people in Clackamas, Multnomah, and Washington counties. It is led by a 7-member council. Its services include management of the region's garbage and recycling systems, operation of more than 17,000 acres of parks and natural areas, running visitor venues like the Oregon Convention Center, Portland 5 Centers for the Arts, and the Oregon Zoo, long-range planning, and support for affordable housing in the region. We want to acknowledge that the land we are on and the land Metro oversees is native land and was stolen from people who lived here for thousands of years. Together, we recognize their unbreakable connections to this land, and we honor the resilience of their ancestors and the hope of future generations. In a moment, Metro Council President Peterson will present her State of the Region address. After her remarks, Marcus Mundy will join Council President Peterson for a conversation about how Metro is responding to our housing and homelessness crises and other critical issues facing the region. Marcus Mundy is the Executive Director of Coalition of Communities of Color, an alliance of 19 culturally specific organizations focused on issues of social and economic justice. He was formerly president and CEO of the Urban League of Portland, and before that held financial management leadership positions with Kaiser Permanente and KPMG. Marcus is also a senior fellow in Oregon's chapter of the American Leadership Forum. Before we begin, I want to thank a few people who made today's program possible. Thank you to our community partners, Chevron, The Standard, Northwest Natural, Kaiser Permanente, and Tonkin Torp, and our partners at Merge Design. Thank you also to Kayla Kennett, City Club Communications Manager, for all of her work putting together today's program. Finally, I want to remind everyone that you can ask questions at any time during today's conversation. Just email us at questions@pdxcityclub.org or tweet at pdxcityclub using the hashtag State of 2022. Now, before welcoming Metro President Lynn Peterson, we will take a short moment to hear from one of our community partners.
What's on the horizon? The answers lie beyond the roads we know. We recognize that energy demand is growing and the world needs lower carbon solutions to keep up. At Chevron, we're working to find new ways forward, like through our venture capital group, backing technologies like electric vehicle charging, carbon capture, and even nuclear fusion. We may not know just what lies ahead, but it's only human to search for it.
Good afternoon, and thank you to City Club for finding ways for us to stay connected on our region's most pressing issues and solutions. And thank you, Bobby. You do a great job, and City Club, you deserve a round of applause. And if we were right here in real, I would be giving you a round of applause. I want to take a few minutes to talk about the real challenges of our region, the challenges we are facing right now, and what we are focused on at Metro, and how we can come together to respond to the crisis on our streets we see every day. And I want to talk about how we can do this while still holding true to our commitments to care for each other and plan for a better future. All you have to do is look around to see that as a country and as a region, we are not measuring up. Our most vulnerable people are unhoused, at risk, and our region is suffering. The situation is urgent, and you have a right to be upset. I'm upset. This is hitting everyone hard. If you are living outside or in your car, trying to keep your kids in school, find stable housing and work, or deal with health issues, it's devastating. If you, like many people, are one bad break away from losing your home, it's terrifying. And if you're trying to run a business and bring in customers after tough times, it's all you think about. There's no sugarcoating this situation. This isn't easy, and we won't end homelessness in the next 6 months. We are suffering the consequences of decades of cuts to housing and critical services by the federal government. We are living the Reagan Revolution. Low wages, income inequality, and skyrocketing housing costs have torn apart whatever safety net we had. Many cities around the country are experiencing the same issues, but we have something that many other cities would dream of: a community that cares deeply and has provided the tools we need to get the job done. Voters in our region approved recent measures in homelessness services and affordable housing that finally allow us to make real progress. Thanks to your vote in 2020, regional investments in homeless services kicked off in July of 2021, 6 months ago. By working together as a region, we have developed a coordinated approach in all 3 counties that is already making a difference in people's lives. This includes new shelter beds and services to help unhoused people get the help they need for physical and mental health, addiction, and find employment. By June 30th of this year, we expect the counties who implement this work to add 900 new year-round shelter beds, which will be in addition to the approximately 2,200 shelter beds in the region already, and stabilize 2,500 people in permanent housing across the Portland region. 1,000 people have already received funding to help stay in their homes and avoid living on the street. We're on the right track and investing in proven solutions, but we also need to address the issue of people living in the streets right now. I have asked Metro's Land Use Advisory Committee, which includes representatives from the region's cities, counties, special districts, and the public, to help our communities develop strategies to site shelters and safe camp locations where the community can play an active and welcoming part. Our goal is to end chronic homelessness in this region. Despite all of the challenges, we know it's attainable because we've already accomplished it for veterans. There are more veterans exiting homelessness than there are veterans becoming homeless in our region. We've been certified as having functionally ended chronic veteran homelessness by the federal government. It's something that we can achieve for all, but it will take time. To reiterate, in less than 6 months, programs are running, people's lives are being improved, and although it may not feel like it just yet, our region is starting to recover. You may not be aware of all that is happening right now, and that's on us. Folks are looking at the streets and wondering if and when things are going to change. We have been busy getting this new effort up and running and haven't done the best job communicating what's happening. We all need to work together to address this crisis, and that requires clear communication. It also requires accountability and transparency. Metro has the oversight responsibility of this homelessness measure. In addition to county-level oversight committees, we have established a regional oversight committee with business and community representatives. We are creating dashboards so that you can track the progress. We are working hard to right the ship. What we can't do is give in to the pain, fatigue, and cynicism and resort to the cruel and inhumane schemes that some are proposing for their own personal benefit. We have to remember who we are as a region and who we want to be. This is not just about homelessness. Many people in this region are experiencing extreme hardship as a result of rising rents. Again, we have you to thank for providing our region with the tools to address the crisis. In 2021, the first apartments paid for by the Metro Affordable Housing Bond opened. Today, from Beaverton to Gresham, from Powell Boulevard to the Tiger Triangle, Oregonians are finding stable, safe housing. Already, more than 360 rent-stabilized, affordable, and livable apartments have opened around our region. Another 2,700 units are in permitting, design, or construction. All of this in less than 3 years. For those of you who have built a home or worked on an addition at home, you know that this is an amazing feat that required a lot of motivated people to move fast, and they did. Altogether, Metro is 75% of the way to our goal of 3,900 homes for the 2018 Affordable Housing Bond Measure, while only allocating 48% of the revenue so far. So for those of you doing the math, we are on pace to outperform our commitments to the voters. Change is happening, thanks to your support, but some things just can't wait. We need to make sure that our region is safe and clean for everyone. So let's talk about garbage. One of the ways Metro contacts people experiencing homelessness is through the RID Patrol. These are the trained crews that clean up garbage in public spaces across our region. A lot of that garbage comes from customers who just don't want to pay their fair share, whether that's unscrupulous contractors or your neighbor who left their, quote, free couch out for a week of nonstop rain. The RID Patrol also works with Oregonians experiencing homelessness to help manage their garbage pickups, because everyone deserves a sanitary place to live. Often, our RID Patrol teams work with trained outreach workers who help connect people to the services they need to find permanent supportive housing. This fall, I went out with our RID Patrol to 1,000 acres near Troutdale to help provide cleanup services to people living in that area. I met some really great people who have come to know and trust our staff over years of hard work. Last year started poorly for dumped or abandoned garbage in this region. Because of the pandemic, we found ourselves without crews to do the work because we were dependent on an out-of-date use of incarcerated labor. We reimagined the program as a workforce initiative and just got new crews up and running in July of 2021. Now, we have 6 crews on the streets, more than we did before the pandemic, and the results are phenomenal. In the last 6 months, more than 418 tons of waste have been picked up by the RID Patrol, weighing as much as 2 Boeing 747s. In November alone, our crews cleaned 300 sites. And as of now, our response time is 2 business days, down from the more than 70 days a year ago. Our crews are almost ready to flip the switch from only responding to reports and start actively looking for areas to clean up, which is what they were doing before the pandemic. We need your help to tell us about dumped garbage, which you can do at ridpatrol.oregonmetro.gov. You can also use our data dashboard to see how we're doing and track when we clean up the dump you report. We're being transparent about how we do our part to keep our region clean, and I am proud of the work we're doing. With time and hard work, good things happen in our region. It's your expectation as voters, as residents, as business owners, as Oregonians. You deserve results, and we are working hard to bring them to you. You've heard government can't do it alone before. We also need you to be part of the solution, to volunteer at a shelter or a health clinic, or donate to the organizations that support the people most in need in our region. We are living in a time of unprecedented wealth and also unprecedented need. If you work for a large employer, help make hiring easier and advocate for living wages. If you are a developer or a landlord, please consider entering into a master lease agreement to make your building available for affordable housing. If there is an opportunity for you to work with opening up a shelter or affordable housing in your neighborhood, please say welcome with open arms and open minds. And if you see someone who is suffering, ask them if they need help. Offer some food, water, gloves, dry socks, or a blanket. Call 211 and help them to a shelter. If you've lived here a long time, you know that those are the steps that we would have taken not so long ago. And if you are new here, you know that that kindness and care and shared responsibility is part of what brought you here. I'm hoping that you'll visit my webpage at oregonmetro.gov/MCP and learn more about opportunities to pitch into fixing our region. I thank you, and I look forward to today's questions.
Hello. You heard earlier, my name is Marcus Mundy. I'm the Executive Director of the Coalition of Communities of Color. We're celebrating a year-long celebration of our over 20 years working in the region, much of that time with Metro, and we're here today to talk about Metro with President Peterson. So I'm not going to waste any time. We're going to move right into audience questions. Just so you know, we canvassed a lot of community partners and residents when preparing a few questions to ask President Peterson. And I also went through all of the questions that were submitted in advance of this gathering. So topics like those will be included as well. We put them into similar buckets where several questions had identical or similar ideas. We hope to get through as many of these as possible, but Council President Peterson and her staff will, I am sure, follow up on any outstanding issues not addressed today. So let's get right into it, Lynn. Equity. You know, my responsibility in the region, we work for equity. So, and the communities I represent and others are concerned that Metro's equity efforts will be lost in all of the priority shifts you lifted up in your commentary. What can you share with us concerning Metro's policies, frameworks, programs, investments, contracting, workforce, anything you can think of to assuage those concerns?
It's a really good question. We have, at Metro and the Metro Council, we have two lenses just to start out with that we look at any decision making or any engagement, and that is a lens of racial equity and a climate change lens. So those two things are upfront and a part of every decision making. So they have to meet performance metrics for whether it's hiring or whether it's for programs or policies. Those are the first things we're going to be looking at. You and I are both part of Reimagine Oregon, and we can talk a little bit about that. Reimagine Oregon being a coalition that has come together of Black leaders that asked all governments from the state level all the way down to the local level to please come and listen to the 30 to 40 years of requests of removing barriers, the systematic racism that is built within the decision-making structure of most of our governments. They're meeting right now. So you and I are actually missing that meeting.
We are.
But yet we're both very committed to making sure there is a checklist of items within each governmental agency that was identified, and we're working our way through a lot of those things. When I mentioned our RID patrol, one of the requests that Reimagine Oregon asked of everybody was not to use incarcerated labor. And so that's
Correct.
one of the reasons we moved from the way we were doing business on our RID patrol to a workforce initiative. A workforce initiative that is working with people to build up their resumes and providing $20 an hour, right? Not minimum wage. Because these folks, every one of us deserve to be able to live, to afford to live in this region. And $15 an hour, you can't afford to do it. It's $26 an hour right now. Okay. So that's one of the ways. There's a long laundry list that we can go through of other things that there was a request that we work with Reimagine Oregon on the Black workers training program out in East Multnomah County. So we have invested in that. And one of the bigger things that I'll just end on for now, besides changing the way we hire and the way we support people of color, BIPOC community members within Metro, is our C2P2, or our Construction Careers Pathway Program. While it predates me, we have done nothing but expand and grow that program to be able to bring folks into the construction trades and be able to get them the apprenticeship hours and the training that they need and work on the environment in which they work, because you and I both know the trades has not been an inviting environment. I grew up working in the construction field, and I know that firsthand. So we have been putting a lot of time and energy into making sure that the training is there so that the opportunity is there for the long term so that the intergenerational wealth can be created.
Thank you for that answer. I want to pivot now and ask about a newly formed nonprofit in the area. We received a lot of questions about this group. It's called People for Portland. I didn't know much about them, so I looked them up. And their website says they're focused on some of the very issues you spoke about: homelessness, houselessness, city cleanliness, all of that. But some of the questioners registered their concerns. The last thing, I saw a news article where they had spent over $1 million on ads talking about their positions on things. So I'm curious, I'm trying to figure it out, but can you share what this is all about? And from a Metro perspective, if this is helpful, what they're doing, or harmful to what Metro has underway?
Yeah, People for Portland is a dark money group. And what that means is that they don't have to reveal their funders or their purpose for actually being. So they have flooded our airwaves and our digital ads with misleading at best ads and information to the general public, and it's increasing cynicism and distrust in government and what we are actually doing. And so what we do know is that what I talked about in my talk earlier, right? We already have 700 new shelter beds within the first 6 months of this program. 200 more are coming online. We have, as I mentioned in our speech, 2,700 new housing units that will be coming online in the next year or two. And we also have been cleaning up the region. So all of the things that they talk about, we've already been doing. And so it undermines our efforts. But what I would like to do is ask those funders of People for Portland to start working to channel their fundings to actually getting people services on the ground and not to enriching political consultants.
And I know you're only speaking for Metro today, but could you maybe share a little bit about on the garbage issue and the cleanliness issue that you just mentioned, your collaborations with some of the other local governments and who does what and how do you work together to get that done?
Well, there's a lot of coordination between, for instance, we partner with Central City Concern when we go out and we go to, if we're going to be going into a homeless encampment, we participate and work with them hand in hand. While we're picking up trash, they're working to make sure that if folks want to leave the streets, there is an opportunity. So we don't do sweeps. But what we do is manage our own land in terms of our parks, all of our assets, to make sure that if there are folks that have set up camp anywhere near or on our property, that we make sure they're safe, anybody around them is safe, and the environment is safe. So we have to do all three things in order to make sure that this is working for everybody.
Okay, I appreciate that. Another pivot. I wanted to talk about parks and some of Metro's other venues. You mentioned the zoo and the convention center and Portland 5. Some of the questions we got was, are there going to be further reductions in services for these areas other than those specifically mandated by health? We have to follow the health guidelines right now, but what do you anticipate happening in those areas?
Well, let's just start with parks because that's an easy one. We never had a reduction in services in our parks as we went through the pandemic, which is great because we are funded by a levy. So that's where we get our funding. And because we had that stable funding, we were able to keep our park system completely open. And the amount of overwhelming gratitude that we received in the first year of the pandemic was overwhelming. People just felt so much, because our land that we have is big and open, lots of trail systems, and you can space, right, very easily. So we were getting a lot of compliments of being able to get out and into fresh air and feel confident about being outside. And so it's just, I just thank the voters for allowing us to have that levy and hopefully keep it going in the future so that we can provide these big open spaces that we protect for habitat, clean air, clean water, as well as access to nature. So that they're good.
Okay.
On the venue side, you know, we mentioned it last year in the State of the Region that when we shut down March 13th as Metro across many of our, all of the venues, that affected the Oregon Zoo, the Convention Center, the Expo Center, P5, Keller, and the Schnitz. And as I mentioned last year, we had to lay off 750 people within the first 3 weeks because, right, nobody was doing anything. We have slowly come back. We have hired people back, and as we hire them back, we're coming back and building back better. And we are hiring people back at, again, $20 is the minimum wage we're basically setting at Metro to be able to bring back people so they can afford to live in this region. Because we don't want to participate in actually not allowing people to be able to live here and access jobs, or that they get evicted, right? We don't want to be part of that system. So we are hiring slowly back as needed, and it's all up to people getting vaccinated, wearing their masks, and behaving safely so that artists feel comfortable coming back and audiences feel comfortable coming in. So it's a joint team effort to bring this region back, because Metro is part of that tourism industry, right? And there's a lot of folks that are dependent on people coming into Portland, from the hotel motel industry, right, to all of the folks who cater. So there's a lot of folks that are dependent upon this, and we look forward to being able to have more safe events. Things have been happening, but we're at a fraction of what we used to be.
Well, thank you for that answer. This is not a commercial, but I do hope people follow the health mandates and guidelines. And I know Metro will be all the way back when the zoo train has the full loop going on now. So, you know. But I want to pivot again. That's a transportation issue, so I want to talk about transportation. We got a lot of questions about the Interstate Bridge Replacement Project, what's going on in the Rose Quarter with the expansion project, and we even got some questions about the transportation measure that didn't quite make it through Metro in the last couple of years. So people were interested, what is Metro's position on transportation? What are your plans in this area, and any major efforts that we can anticipate coming up?
Yeah, well, I think we all know that we have lacked significant investment in transportation for the last 4 decades. So we had a long ways to go to make up for that as our region grows, right? And I think that the new administration, the Biden administration's federal transportation package is a huge step forward. It's a very positive step forward for this region, and we will do very well in it, but we will basically be paying for the projects we know about, like I-5 Bridge and Rose Quarter. And a lot of the other projects that we know about in the region, in order to be competitive at the federal level, we need local match. And right now, we don't really have the type of local match to compete on a national scale. So these two things go hand in hand in order to be able to not just move people through our region, which is what I-5 does on the most part, right? It's the interstate system. We're moving a lot of goods and services from ports here and beyond. And so there's a lot of travel through our communities. But what Metro is really concerned about is moving people around and inside our communities, because that's the majority of the trips in the region. The majority of the trips are not actually on the interstate, right? They're in the region trying to access jobs, healthcare, education. And so we want to make sure that we are doing that as safely and efficiently as possible with that racial equity overlay and with that climate change overlay. So with all that context, I'm very proud of the Metro Council and how we are setting up the values and our expectations for outcomes and actions on these bigger projects, as well as the other projects like TV Highway, 82nd Avenue, McLaughlin. We've set up expectations of what do we want to be when we grow up? We want to be better than what we are today. We want people to have more access to jobs than they do today. Right now, there are places that are essentially islands because people can't access safely and affordably the things that they need in their life. And we can't afford to do that anymore. We need to make sure that our BIPOC and our low-income communities actually have the access of safe and affordable transportation. So we have set up those expectations in a values, outcomes, action document that we just adopted as a council. We will be looking at doing the same thing on I-205 and congestion pricing, setting up our expectations so that we're clear and that we are moving things forward in a positive way.
Well, I appreciate that. I have one quick follow-up, and that was on the equity piece you mentioned, because when you talk about access to transportation, I think about Hillsborough, I think about Gresham, I think about Clackamas, and I think those are our far out spaces, and there's a lot of low-income people in those spaces. And I also think about that last mile in those places. Sometimes the transit ends and they have no way. So are some of the plans you talked about, do they include kind of that kind of thinking about those places out in the hinterlands, but that need that assistance at the end?
You know what? It is communities right here in Portland's backyard that might be right on I-5 or right on I-205 in either place where the interstate has created a barrier, right? So the bus line might be on the other side of I-5. Is it safe for me to get to that bus line, to get to my job, even though it's within a half-mile walking distance? Is that safe? If I am older, if I'm young, is it safe? We need to be asking questions like that. And that's why on the Rose Quarter project, we see this as a project that's restorative justice, because I-5 completely decimated North Portland as it went through culturally and physically. And so in order to put those things back in place and not have it be a barrier, we have to intentionally, very intentionally make sure that a transportation project is investment in the community. It's growth and it's intergenerational wealth creation, not just moving people from California to British Columbia.
I appreciate that. Thank you for that answer. My next questions, it's actually two questions in one, so get ready. It's a compound question, but they're both framed on the long term, so I want to ask them together, and then you can answer any way you like. But how prepared is this region for the dramatic land use and lifestyle changes we'll have to make in the future vis-a-vis climate change? You know, the long view that requires immediate attention. And then the second part of that is, how do we best balance the short-term issues of the city, the unhoused, crime, and violence, with working on the systemic, the long-term causes of these issues, which are still going to take much longer? So there's a lot in there, but I know you can handle it.
So let's talk first about the first question about resiliency of our region.
Okay.
I think that the transportation projects that we just talked about are important pieces of resiliency of our community, right? If there is an earthquake or a natural disaster, we need to make sure that we are still able to move around, which is why the I-5 bridge needs to be replaced, right? Because it is not ready for the big one, right? It will come down, and we are dependent on being able to move goods and services in and out. In an emergency, we're going to need that connection to where the goods and services are, right? Otherwise, we're cut off. So that's one of transportation, obviously, making sure that people can get around. Second, on resiliency, I think what we all saw in the heat domes is that we need to protect our elderly and our young in terms of air conditioning and making sure that they are safe when that happens. So in the affordable housing bond measure, we went back and we have actually funded now putting air conditioning into the units that have already been constructed and requiring those going forward, or asking our community, our jurisdictional partners to make sure that that is a priority from now on. So that's another way to make sure we're resilient. The third way, it gets around fires, right? Emergency management within this region. A lot of the cities and counties have intergovernmental agreements, just a way to say that they have an agreement that if you are in need, we will come and help you no matter what, because we've already taken care of all the legal, stuff around it. So there's no question. We show up, we help you, no question. What we found in the emergency of COVID is that Metro needs to step into this space and have some sort of intergovernmental agreement so that we don't have any question about how to help Multnomah County out with homeless or cooling shelters, right? It's already set up and we're ready to go. So we need to be quicker. We did it as quick as we could, but we need to have all these things set up so that communication is easy, as well as being able to house Clackamas County residents with horse trailers up at Expo, right? We just need to be able to do that and do it as quickly as possible.
Okay, I appreciate that. I think we're still good on time.
There's a second part of your question, though.
Well, the second part of my question was the how do we balance the short-term issues? The stuff we're all talking about, the unhoused, crime, and violence, with the balancing that with the systemic causes for the long term.
So while it's not a complete answer. One, that's what Metro's always been focused on is the long term, right? Is working to find the upstream problems, whether it's in our transportation, our land use, our economic development, whatever it's. We are the ones who ask everybody to come with us on the 50-year journey into the future, and then say, well, so how do we get to that place that we all want to go? What I've asked our Land Use Advisory Committee, or IMPAC, to look at is to actually specifically not just look at the long-term for land use and transportation and economic development in our region, but also to look at the upstream issues around homelessness, to make sure that we know the economic variables in our region that are pushing people into this crisis state, and then look at what we can do to stop the bleeding. Because we can't solve homelessness until we stop the number of people going into homelessness being so great. So we're going to have to work on both. We're going to have to be able to do that together, because that requires a private-public partnership and a neighborhood-to-neighborhood partnership of being welcoming of folks being able to camp safely in their neighborhood, but also looking at, like I said, the hiring practices and making sure that the barriers are removed. Because once you've been homeless, how do you get out? How do you stay housed once we've gotten you in place? So.
Yeah, the wraparound services,
services
are important.
But it's private and public.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you for those answers. You mentioned in your comments garbage. And many of our questions had to do with garbage. So I'm going to share this one question. And I will give you some feedback that I heard from more than one resident was, we don't care who does what.
Yeah.
We don't care where the solution comes from. Metro's our regional partner, so figure out the partnerships and let's get it done. So that's the predicate. And then the question is just that, assuming that cleaning garbage has coincided with sweeps, have any specific criteria which determine whether a camp gets swept has been communicated to the houseless community? And if so, if it's yes, how does this criteria compare or contrast to normal times? Have we made policy exceptions now, or are we enforcing existing laws on a case-by-case basis?
I can only really speak to Metro.
Okay.
One, we coordinate with our partners who do sweeps, because we don't do them. We're not in charge of that, but we coordinate with them, so they ask us to participate in helping clean up the garbage when we're asked. Or we do have our weekly, bi-weekly pickup services for the homeless encampments. So when you look around the region right now, there are still homeless encampments, but they actually are cleaner. And that is a large part to the fact that we are now able to go and pick up that trash for them. The coordination has been getting better and better and better to make sure that all pieces of the puzzle we're all working towards the same vision, which is getting our region back to normal and picked up. So we're working on our part, and we're working in coordination with everybody from the city to the Department of Transportation.
And that all sounds promising, but one part of it, which was one part of the next question, was how do you reach out to those that aren't participating in the digital divide, that don't have the phones and the laptops, and how do they get the information?
In a homeless encampment? I'm sorry.
Yeah,
Okay.
on the street, in the homeless encampments, how do you let them know what Metro's doing? How do you let them know the services that are available that are part of getting them out?
Well, for Metro's part, I can talk about, and that is that we go out and we are one-to-one with those people in the field, and we have long-standing relationships. We weren't out there for a good year of COVID because we were moving the program from incarcerated labor to a workforce initiative, but we have long-standing relationships. Our people work very hard. Our teams they are so respectful of people's needs and making sure that they feel like real people, right?
Well,
so we go out and we build that trust, and we work with them, and we are able then to connect them to other services if they ask.
Well, that's hopeful to hear. Thank you. Thank you for that. That's a very specific question, but what would it take for Metro to reevaluate Gateway and bring it the focus and significant investment it so desperately needs? Now, I know that section of the city, and there's a lot of potential there, so I'm more than curious as to what that answer would
In fact,
be.
Commissioner Hardesty lives in that general
Okay.
area. It's a really important part of our region, and Metro has done a lot of work with the city of Portland to advance planning money and to work on developments within that area. East Multnomah County, though, is in the entirety of his need of investment. And so what I would say is that is part and parcel of the work that we do in the background while we are taking care of these emergency situations that confront us right now.
I appreciate that. Okay. What aspects of land use planning, if it's appropriate, and policy development do you think TriMet should take a lead on? And maybe you could also explain a little bit for those who don't know the partnership or the way you work with TriMet and how they're different from Metro.
Yeah. Well, having worked at TriMet almost 20 years ago and at Metro almost 20 years ago and now back, there is a really, really close relationship between Metro and TriMet. We are looking at the long term, the 50-year, the 20-year, the 5-year implementation with money coming out. Metro is obviously operating and providing a service on the ground to make sure that people can get around the region, right, in a safe and affordable way. And a lot of the regional plan is dependent on the success of TriMet and making sure that those trips are, again, safe and affordable. The relationship between the two is that our whole region is based on being able to connect high-density development, right? And build that out in corridors so that people have access to that safe and affordable transportation. TriMet has looked at its portfolio and has been part of building out that high-density development. So as they build out their corridors, they are looking and partnering with us and partnering with the cities that they work in to build affordable housing, as well as just high-density, transit-oriented development. It means that in the long run, you can either reduce the number of trips because you don't have to leave to go somewhere really far, or you just you reduce the length of the trip. And the shorter the trip on the system, the more trips we can actually handle within our system. So it means that there's more mobility within our network if people don't have to drive or walk as far. So they are part and parcel. They are the backbone, I would say, of our transportation system of this region, and they help on the development side.
Appreciate that. Now, I think there's some specific audience questions that are coming in now, so I'm going to ask you a couple of those if that's all right. This is very specific. Again, who is reviewing the internal processes of supportive housing services grant awards to assure that pass-through organizations don't have a conflict of interest with the sub-grantees that they distribute funding to?
You know, the 3 counties, in order to access the funds of the supportive housing service measure, the homelessness measure, had to create local implementation plans. Right. And those local implementation plans say, these are the goals that we are going to hit. That is what we're holding them accountable. Are you getting to those goals? The performance or audits, this is almost an audit function, is taken care of on an annual basis and is part and parcel of what the counties do. And Metro also has an auditor, an elected auditor that I know will be looking very carefully at everything that's going on within the program, as well as the county auditors. So we'll be dependent on the auditors doing their job to make sure that these types of things are discussed and looked at. We're gonna make sure that the counties are hitting their targets.
Okay.
How many people served, how many people stay housed, all of these things, and the general cost effectiveness. But there's a lot of checks and balances already within the system to deal with issues like that.
So you described an oversight process, so the counties are responsible for providing the services,
That's
and you
right.
are the oversight
Yep.
and making sure they're in compliance and still working, okay.
Yep.
And working in partnership with them. That's important for the community to know. Thank you.
Yep.
Okay.
Metro is a 40-year-old organization and had 4 lines of business prior to the affordable housing and the supportive housing services. And what we know in this region is that when we regionalize an issue that is complicated like this, we start to figure out how to work together and get more efficiency and do better for our citizens.
Now, the housing bond in and of itself can't fund all the money needed for houselessness. So where's the rest of the money to overcome houselessness going to come from? Is it, they posed the question, is it raising wages? Is it some other sustainable process for avoiding houselessness? Where's the money going to come from?
It's multifaceted, and it's why I've asked our Land Use Advisory Committee which is made up of elected officials, special districts, the public, to really start looking at the upstream issues, right? How much affordable housing do we need? We have a 2016 study that needs to be updated on how much affordable housing does the region actually need. We know that we're short by a long shot, but we also know that it's a private-public issue, right? We need more private affordable housing to be developed because it can't all be public housing. We're going to need that to happen. And what does it take to get the private development out there? It's going to take shorter times to develop, right? With the permitting process, it's going to take how do you waive fees and not permits themselves, but the permit fees as we move forward? How are our cities and counties going to work together to say affordable housing is a priority, and here's how we're going to help to do that?
Thank you. I appreciate that. I have a question, and I think this is a Metro question, but what is the region doing about the lack of policing, the lack of response to 911 and non-emergency calls, and responses to the public reporting crimes and drugs? But again, it's the homeless camps and in neighborhoods. So is that under Metro's umbrella? And if not, then how do you partner when these things come across Metro's plate?
Short answer is we have no public safety department. We're not part of that system. What we do have is safety enforcement over our venues, and we're looking at how we do that to make sure that people are safe and that we are removing systematic racism within how we do our business. So our contracts with private security, for instance. We're looking at things like that, but we don't have any sort of overarching public safety component. We are part of a team that discusses how to coordinate the homeless encampment pickups and tracking to make sure that the needs are being taken care of. But we don't have any public safety component.
Thanks. This is a question about philanthropic dollars, but I would also like to ask you about government dollars, and you mentioned just now private dollars. What is the best use of those buckets of dollars with respect, again, to houselessness?
That's a good question. You know, there have been some heroes on the private side that have come forward to try and find ways to engage, Homer Williams being one of them, trying to find ways to help with providing tents and sleeping bags, the things that the homeless need just to stay safe, right? As well as being able to partner with other private nonprofit corporations that are providing shelters as well. So I would say that there's a lot of opportunity out there, and if somebody wants to donate some money in a big way, we could help you find a way to do that.
Okay. There was a, sorry for the there was a question about the demand for housing in our area exceeds supply, and at all but the high-end level. So how does the county or the city or Metro, how do we help bring the supply into balance with at all income levels with the least amount of harm? And you've touched on it a couple times, but I just wanted to give you an opportunity to expand on it if you wanted to.
Well, having served as a city councilor at Lake Oswego, having served as the chair of Clackamas County, there is a need to do things such as the Tuolumne Parks Recreation District has done, which is to waive system development fees or to put them off so a developer can pay them later. Right now, we have a lot of fees that developers have to put into a pool of money so that the cities can actually provide improvements to intersections or increase the capacity at a park system. There are good reasons why we do it, but it makes it harder to get affordable housing, right? So how do cities and special districts look at those fees as well as the time to permitting, because time is money? How do we reduce those costs in collaboration with the private sector so that while the public doesn't lose out on their services, we are still being able to move affordable housing because we are in an emergency. And an emergency requires us to really look deep at what are our priorities right now, what do the people need, and how do we move forward? But we have really great cities and really great counties and special districts right now who are grappling with this. We just need to come together and find a way to get those best practices out there and encourage.
I appreciate your answer. The one thing the pandemic has taught me is that as a group, we can do anything if we prioritize it right. Things we never thought we could do.
That's right.
2 years ago, we have done. So
That's right.
I'm hopeful that what you just described with the cities and the counties and the region continues to progress. Not all of our questions are global. So some of the questions, we're going to test your breadth of knowledge as the council president. What will Metro do to make the regional trails, like the Peninsula Crossing Trail, safer?
Oh, I think folks are talking about homelessness and encampments on the trails. So again, our portion of this is to make sure that the counties are doing their work to get people off the streets, right, and in and housed. So that is not up for us to target. The outreach workers go out and they go to encampments and they go and they work one-on-one with people. I think where we come in is to make sure that those public areas, if there has been an illegal dump or if encampment wants us to pick up garbage, that we are there to make sure that happens.
Okay, good. Thank you. Thank you. And some late breaking news. These are real-time questions, and I'm going to share them with you now. The public hears that many responding to the census, probably the point in time census, I would imagine, are choosing camping and reluctant to move into shelters or accept other government or nonprofit assistance. In your estimation, is that true? And if so, what are the tools for drawing people into the shelters and off the streets?
There's a lot of trauma of folks who live on the streets and a lot of distrust because this is where they've landed. And for a lot of them, no fault of their own. And a lot more people are becoming unhoused because of evictions, because they aren't able to pay their rent or their mortgages. So I think we need to start with where the people are and not where we think they ought to be.
Okay.
And I think that's what the outreach workers are doing one-on-one. And I don't know if I've answered the question, but I think that it's important for us to understand that if you have a partner, there are limited shelter beds. If you have a partner and you want to stay with your partner, if you have a dog, there are limited ways to be able to keep your dog, right? And so I think building up trust and getting more shelter beds and getting more opportunities for people to feel like they're still going to be a whole person and they don't have to give up what little that they have to hang on to feel like a person. I think we just need to be very empathetic, but also move and establish those relationships as quickly as possible.
I appreciate that. That was a solid answer to a complex question. It is very complex. It's not a one-size-fits-all answer. Next question is, when we acknowledge the efficiencies that are being achieved when services are consolidated in Metro, instead of allocated among the Lower jurisdictions, I don't
They
think
are
is
not lower
They are not
jurisdictions.
lower, different, the other jurisdictions. Can we identify any additional services and opportunities for consolidation in Metro?
Well, first of all, I'm going to start from a personal level.
Okay.
The Oregon state motto, "She flies with her own wings," in Latin actually means, the she means cities and governments, it means local government.
Okay.
I come from local government. When local government is really good at knowing its own citizens' needs within its jurisdiction. And I put a lot of value on that, and I know Oregonians do. It is our state motto.
Yes.
So going to regionalization is an important thing to have the opportunity to have, and we are very lucky to have it. But we need to be careful about how we go about doing that. It's when the cities and counties realize that they can no longer do the services themselves because the lines have been blurred and the boundaries mean nothing. That's when they come to us, or when the citizens come to us and say, we need to think about this. And I think Metro's always willing to have that conversation, but I can tell you right now, we have 2 startups after 40 years, affordable housing and homeless measure. So we're kind of at capacity right now, and we're really, really focused. In the future, I think the entire Metro Council is open to regionalization of services when it becomes noticeable that the cities can't do it alone, but I'm going to look to them because they know when that's happening.
One little minor follow-up on that, it's been our experience in dealing with the affordable housing and homelessness issues that something you said in your answer about people don't see where the lines are. If you're in homeless services, they don't care if they're in Clackamas or Washington or Multnomah, right. They just want the service. So
no, and 15 years ago, I was chair of Clackamas County. We were talking about the need to regionalize services. So the counties were ready to take this step, and they did, and we should be very proud of the fact that they said this is bigger than any one county. It is an entire region, and we're all in. And that, I think, would be a really good place to say, we are at a point where we need to start believing in ourselves again. We have amazing people in this region and amazing staff at Metro and all of the jurisdictions that are working really hard in this crisis. We need to acknowledge that and push them forward, and that will accelerate this work. So we just need to believe in ourselves again. We have it within ourselves, and we can do this.
Well, thanks for that feedback. And even though we might not be at the absolute end, but what have I not asked you about that I should know? That we should know, that we all should know in this region?
We covered a lot.
We did. You do.
There's so much going on in the background at Metro. While we're very, very focused on the emergency that we have right now, I think the things that people should be really proud of that are going on is that we were able to keep the zookeepers at the zoo during COVID with amazing private support because there were no customers, and that we were able to support and care for all of the souls at the zoo throughout the pandemic. And they were there and ready to welcome everybody when we were able to bring people back, and that it's a huge asset. That we have just opened up 2 new parks within our system, Chehalem Ridge and Newell Creek Canyon. So we have a brand new park, just outside of Hillsborough and Forest Grove, and a brand new park just in Oregon City that we are welcoming people to and protecting critical habitat and clean air and water at the same time. There's a lot going on, but we wanted to focus today on the emergency and that we are making progress.
Thank you. Well, I'll end up with one thing. There's a lot of goodwill, despite everything. There's a lot of goodwill out in our region. What would you tell? What can concerned community members do to help heal our community, and how can they help you in your job?
There's a lot actually that they can do, and I named some of those things in the speech. I think one of the larger things that our region needs to come to terms with right now in order to get folks off the streets and into safe camp or safe park places is for every city and every county to look at their assets, their private, public assets. Where could these people be safely housed? Outside, right? Safe park, safe camp. That's a community-wide thing, and that means that every neighborhood has to look deep within themselves and say, how can I be part of the solution, and how can I invite these people to be my neighbors in a different way, right?
Wow.
So I think that's one big thing that we all need to deal with. The other is just being able to make those donations to some of these nonprofits who are working so hard in collaboration with our homeless measure, to make the donations of coats or go to a shelter. I've signed up to be able to work at the emergency shelters. It was a quick and easy process to be able to do it, 2-hour training, virtually done. But you know, it was important not to just provide the convention center or expo center to me. It was important to be able to actually help out at that kind of level. So I think there's a lot of things that people can do. And if they go to my website, they'll be listed there.
Thank you. Well, I encourage everybody to go to the website and check out places that they can plug in. And I want to take this opportunity to thank you, Metro Council President Lynn Peterson, for having a conversation with us today and also letting us know what's going on with Metro in our region. And I would like to thank the City Club for giving this opportunity to hear from our elected officials about what's going on in our region. I thank everybody for listening today. If there are follow-up questions, please reach out to City Club and to Metro Council President Lynn Peterson for follow-up questions. And thank you for coming out today.
Thank you, Marcus.
Thank you. Thank you, President Peterson.